Algebra 2, Lesson 58, Completing the Square. So you have talked about perfect square trinomials where you can factor them into a squared binomial. So a trinomial, it has three terms, and a binomial has two terms. So I'm going to remind you about that in a second, what it looks like. But I do want to remind you of this. This is called the square root property, and you use it to solve quadratic equations. If x squared equals a, and a is greater than 0, then your answer is going to be x equals the square root of a, or x equals the negative square root of a. If x squared equals a, then x equals plus or minus the square root of a for any answer for a that is greater than 0 or positive. I'm going to remind you about how to change a perfect square trinomial into a squared binomial. We have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. This is a perfect square trinomial. If you were to factor it, you get a plus b squared. Right here, what if you have a minus sign in there? A squared minus 2ab plus b squared. If you were to factor this, you get a minus b squared. So keep that in mind, and I'm going to do an example with you and show you how you're going to have your first number and your last number. Usually it's going to be x squared. Since it's a perfect square trinomial, it's going to be x squared. And we'll have some number back here. We might have to find the square root of it to figure out what we need. But then right here, it's going to be 2 times a times b. So you're going to see a lot of numbers that are similar. So this is our first question. We need to solve this trinomial. X squared minus 2x plus 25 equals 9. They're asking us to solve for x. So I did this first step right here. X squared we have. And then this last term, it needs to be in the form of being squared. Well, do you know what the square root of 25 is? It's 5. So we can rewrite 25 as 5 squared, so it's in this form, and we have a minus here. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to put 2 times a, which is x, times b, which in this case is 5. Ignore, to figure out what your a and b are, ignore your exponents, because 2 times 5 is 10. We're going to have this, it's just being rewritten. Now, to actually change it into this form, into a squared binomial, what you're going to do a minus b. So this is a, this is b. Again, ignore the exponents. We just want to figure out what a is. It's going to be x, b is 5. And the sign that goes between them, because this is a minus, we're going to put a minus sign between them. Don't forget to square it, and that equals 9. We need to solve this. To solve this, we want to get rid of our exponent of 2. We're trying to solve for x. So do the opposite. Take the square root on both sides. These are going to cancel. We're going to have x minus 5 equals, then we have 9 here. The square root of 9, it's either going to be, it's going to be plus or minus 9. We know the square root of 9 is 3. It's going to be plus or minus 3. And to solve for x, let's write two equations down. X minus 5 equals, we'll do the positive 3, and we'll be able to solve for x pretty simply. And then we'll do x minus 5 equals negative 3. You're going to have two answers. You can tell by looking, well, this is our first equation. The exponent tells you how many answers you'll have, for the most part. There are some exemptions, but this 2 means we're going to have 2 answers for x. Add 5 to both sides to get our first answer. Those add up to 0, so x equals 8. Again, add 5 to this side. That equals 0, x equals 2. Negative 3 plus 5 is 2. And these are our answers. X equals 8 and x equals 2. We've solved that quadratic equation. Now, for the next one, x squared plus 24x plus 144 equals 5. These are both positive, so we're going to use this form right here. So we're going to leave the x squared the same. It doesn't change. This b squared, to figure out what it is, we just take the square root of 144. That's going to be 12 squared. We're just rewriting 144 as a square. So now this middle term right here, 24x, another way to rewrite it is we're going to have plus 2 times a, which is going to be x, times b. Always write your numbers first. Plus, I didn't leave enough space, and that equals 5. So we have x squared, or a squared, plus 2 times a, which is x, times b, which is 12. And then this b squared, 144, we took the square root, that's going to be 12 squared, and leave the 5 over here. Now we need to solve it and rewrite it in this form. So we have a plus b. A is x, b is 12, don't forget to square it, equals 5. Now the next step, it asks us to solve it, so we're going to take the square root of both sides. These cancel. We have x plus 12 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. 5 does not have a perfect square, so we're just going to leave it as the square root of 5. But we do want to solve, so I'm going to rewrite 2 equations like I did over here. The first equation is x plus 12 equals the positive square root of 5. The next equation is x plus 12 equals the negative square root of 5. Subtract 12 from both sides. It adds up to 0 here. So our answer, x equals negative 12 plus the square root of 5. Put your coefficients first and leave the square roots at the end. And then this one, if we subtract 12 from both sides, that adds up to 0, and we have x equals negative 12 minus the square root of 5. That's our answer. If you want to have an actual number, just put that into your calculator and you can find it, but you do not need to simplify it anymore. Leave it this way. What happens if you don't have a perfect square trinomial? There is a thing called completing the square. So let's say you're given x squared plus bx. You don't know what the rest of the square is, of the trinomial. What you're going to do is you're going to add to it the square of half of the coefficient of x. This is our coefficient. We don't know this number. We'll figure it out when they give us an example. You're going to take this number, let's say it's 10x. You're going to take the coefficient of 10, divide it by 2. Well, 10 divided by 2 is 5. That answer is you're going to square it, and that will help you complete the square. You'll add it to the end. This right here and in here. It's going to get added. So our first question we're given, example 2, x squared plus 18x. It asks us to complete the square and then factor the perfect square trinomial that we have come up with. We don't know what the end is going to be, but we do know what 18 is. Another way that might help you figure out what it is ax squared plus bx plus c. If you use this, you'll know that a is 1, b is 18, and we have to solve for c, this coefficient right here. This constant. So we're going to take our coefficient, or the number in front of x, we're going to call it b. So I'm going to do a little bit of work over here. B divided by 2. So we'll replace b with 18. 18 divided by 2 is 9. We know that. Now our next step is we're going to take this answer from our first step. We're going to square it. 9 squared. And if you know 9 squared is 81. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add 81 right here at the end. Okay? It's always going to be positive because if you square something, if you square 2 negatives, it makes a positive. So this is what c equals. It equals 81. We've completed the square. Now it looks like these guys right here. Right here. So now they ask us to factor it. Well, to factor it, we're going to have a plus b, because we have 2 positives here. If there was a minus here, we'd have a minus b, but it's a plus b. If you want to help you a little bit better, x is a plus b, 81 right here. The answer to your first step, which is 9, is going to be what you're going to put in here, because if we square it, 9 squared is 81. It's the same thing. So x plus 9 squared is our answer. Now, you can use this method to solve quadratic equations. That was just an expression, x squared plus 18x. Quadratic equation means it has an equal sign in it. So to solve this quadratic equation, we can complete the square. What it needs to be is, it needs to be in this form, x squared plus 18x, and then we'll have something on the other side of the equal sign. So we want to leave the x's, x squared and x on the left side of the equal sign, but on the right side, we want to have our constant on the right side. So our constant in this case is 8. So to do that, you add 8 to both sides. On the left, it'll cancel, and you have x squared minus 14x equals, I'm going to leave a little space, 0 plus 8 is 8. Now we need to complete the square. We need to figure out what c is over here. But if we add any number to the left side of the equal sign, we have to add it to the right side. Because if we were to add 3 over here, it would change and it would not be equal anymore if we didn't add it to the right side. So whatever you add to the left side, you must add to the right side. Kind of keep everything balanced. So to find out what this c is, you take the negative 14, I'm going to do it over here, divided it by 2, you get negative 7. Now, our next step is we're going to take negative 7 and we're going to square it. That is 49. So you're going to add 49 to both sides, that's what c is, 49 to both sides of the equal sign to keep everything even. This now, we can factor it. There's a minus sign here and a plus sign here, so it's going to be a minus b. So in this case, we have x minus, it's not 49, remember it's the answer here, so it's x minus 7 squared. And then 49 plus 7 is 57, you just add that side. So we now have rewritten this, we've completed the square. To solve for x, we're going to take the square root of both sides. This will cancel. We have x minus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 57. And to solve for x, I'm going to write two equations. X minus 7 equals the positive square root of 57, and x minus 7 equals the negative square root of 57. You add 7 to both sides. You have x equals 7 plus the square root of 57, and add 7 to both sides. You get x equals 7 minus the square root of 57. You can leave it written like this. Another way you could do is x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 57. Either way is correct to write it. This just takes up a little bit less space and time. So now, we completed the square and we solved for x. I'm going to move to example 4, a word problem. It says, during a baseball game, a player hits a fly ball. The height, which is f of t, is in feet. The height of the ball at a time in seconds can be described by the function, and here they gave us the function. We need to write the equation in vertex form, and I'll give you a refresher on that, by completing the square. So first we need to complete the square. Then we need to determine the maximum height of the ball and the time it takes to reach the maximum height. So first let's complete the square. We have our function. Okay, negative 16t squared plus 64t plus 4. These are slightly different than over here. This is a function. Everything's going to stay on the same side of the equal sign. But we need to complete the square here. So I'm going to rewrite it. Negative 16t squared plus 64t plus, we're going to figure out what we have to add to this side. Okay, and then don't forget your 4, and whatever we add on the inside, we must add on the outside. I will tell you in a second what's going to happen. So let's complete the square. First, can you factor anything out of what's in the parentheses? Is there anything you're able to factor out? Yes, we can factor out a negative 16. So here, if we factor out a negative 16, what we have left, negative 16t squared divided by negative 16 is going to be t squared. We want it to be like this. We want the coefficient in front of our x or t, whatever it is, we want it to be 1. And then 64 divided by negative 16 is negative 4t. And then we're going to add some number in here, plus 4, plus whatever we add in here. If it's 2 or 10 or whatever it is, we have to add it out here. But because if it was 2 in here, if we were to actually multiply this out, it'd be negative 16 times 2, which is negative 32. So what you always want to do, whatever, if you factor something out, you want to write the factor over here too, negative 16. We're going to multiply it by whatever gets added in here. All right, now we've factored it. We can look at this and we can figure out what we're going to put here. You take this middle term right here, negative 4, and you divide by 2. You get negative 2. Then you take the negative 2 and you square it. So you get 4. We're going to add 4 on the inside and on the outside, because negative 16 times 4 is negative 64. Negative 16 times 4, negative 64. We want them to be equal. So now we can, now that we've completed the square, we'll leave whatever was factored out, just leave it there. This guy right here will factor. Because it's a minus and a plus, we're going to take t minus, or a minus b, which in this case is 2, squared, plus negative 16 times 4 plus 4. We need to make sure that it's the same. So we have 68. Okay, now to solve this, we have our function, f of t. It asks us to write an equation in vertex form by completing the square. So we did that. Vertex form, this is what vertex form is. It's f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k. So we have it in vertex form. We know what a is, we know what h is, we know what k is. Now we can solve and change it to vertex form. F of t, just replace everything. So a is negative 16, x minus h, or in this case it's a t, minus a positive 2. Oops. The reason why we want it to be positive is because we want it to end up being the same as here. So t minus 2 squared plus 68. Now it's in vertex form. Now we can easily tell what they ask us to do, to find the maximum height of the ball and the time it takes to reach the maximum height. So the h and the k are going to tell us the maximum height of the ball. So h right here is this number in parentheses. H equals 2, and k is the number on the outside, the constant. K equals 68. You can write that as an ordered pair. You can write hk, so 2 comma 68, but they ask us the maximum height of the ball. It's 68 feet because they told us that it was in feet, and the time, it took 2 seconds to reach 68 feet. So you can say the ball went 68 feet high in 2 seconds. And there you have it. Okay, your homework is lesson 58, practice questions A through E.